This Monday, Manchester United travel away from home to face Everton, and let me tell you, this is a massive opportunity. Teams around United, like Chelsea and Aston Villa, have dropped points this weekend, so for United, this is a great chance to climb further into the top four. However, there's a problem. United have faced these games before and really slipped up. So how can we make sure it doesn't happen this time? So let's start off with a little bit of a fact file. In terms of form, Everton over the last 5 games have had 2 wins, 2 draws and 1 loss. Not bad at all. And actually find themselves sitting pretty comfortable in the Premier League table right now. However, the Everton that you face is different depending on where they are playing. When they play at home, Everton average 48% possession of the ball. But away from home, that goes down to 40%. However, what's really interesting is the goals that they concede in both types of games. At home, Everton concede 1.38 goals per 90 minutes, whereas away from home, that drops to 0.92. Now, what that suggests to me is in the games where Everton have a little bit more of the ball, they open up a little bit, they're actually more vulnerable defensively and concede more goals. However, I think in this game they will probably defend a little bit deeper, because last time that they played a side away from home in a top 6, they had 37% of the ball, and last time they played a team at home against the top 6, they had 35% possession. So I think for Manchester United, this is going to be a very difficult game, especially when you consider that no team in the league takes longer on restarts than Everton, and they have a very physical style. United will need to battle, but also be very, very patient. So basically, the aim for this video is to look at Manchester United on the ball, because I think we will have more possession, and look at how we can try and hurt Everton in multiple different phases of the game. Because we know that United do struggle the second that we have more possession, so we need to see a change in this game. And sort of my case study for this game was Everton against Aston Villa, because I think Villa tactically are quite similar to United. Villa are another side who are a big team, but are better when they have less of the ball, a bit like what United are, also a bit like what Everton are. Last time Everton played Villa, Everton actually won the game 1-0 and put in a pretty good performance. However, I saw things that I thought defensively Manchester United could try and expose. So let's start off with Manchester United playing out from the back on the ball. And it might come as a little bit of a surprise to hear that Everton are an aggressive team. Everton are a side that like to press. You sort of think of David Moyes, wrongly I think, and assume he's someone who's going to be very defensive and get lots of players behind the ball. But that's not the case. In moments, Everton do like to press quite high up the pitch. And in the Villa game that I watched, they used 2 different approaches. One of them was a ball side 4-2-3-1. So you can see on paper here, Everton are in a 4-2-3-1. It is their most used formation so far this season. And off the ball, early on in that game, it actually looked quite similar. Particularly when Villa went to their right-hand side, so imagine United going to our right-hand side, you would see a very lopsided 4-2-3-1. So the striker will come over, the attacking midfielder will come over, and the winger from the far side will come over as well. The problem that Everton had in that game was they were trying to lock to one side of the pitch, but when Villa were patient, and Villa were very happy to go back to their goalkeeper, then Everton struggled to get pressure on the ball. So let's say Manchester United trying to play out from the back, and we're moving the ball, and we go to the right, and Dalot picks up the ball. In moments where he's then happy and comfortable to come backwards to Lomans, who is a good player on the ball, as we've seen in recent weeks, then you can sort of find your way to the other side of the pitch. So that is something that United need to consider. Being patient in the first phase and actually going back to your goalkeeper and sort of restarting and resetting. Because if you can get the ball to the left, then Patterson at fullback, with Jake O'Brien suspended, Patterson is a little bit passive defensively. He doesn't like to come and connect because he doesn't like leaving Tarkowski exposed. So that is something to think about. Now, in that game against Villa that I've been talking about, Everton actually adapted, and what we saw was a move to a pressing shape which looked more like a 4-1-4-1. So what that meant was that one of the wingers went a little bit wider like this, and one of the midfielders would jump a little bit higher. Now, the personnel in that game were quite different, but I think Everton will line up something like this, and they went for more of a 4-1-4-1, with 2 players in midfield being incredibly aggressive on the double pivot in here. That's how Everton like to play. The central midfielders are really aggressive with the way that they press. However, what you will notice is that the striker, Barry, up front, is 1 versus 2. He's got 2 players that he's got to try and pick up. And this is something that I think United can exploit in the first phase, especially if United are willing to really narrow off our central midfielders, then really widen our centre-backs. I think we can give these Everton players too much ground to cover. Because what normally happens, what Everton like to do, is Barry will start here and you force the ball one way, and then this midfielder likes to jump, and you sort of keep the Manchester United midfielder in your shadow press, and you get towards the ball and apply pressure to the player on the centre-back, which is all well and good in theory, but if Manchester United make the pitch much bigger, those gaps that Everton have to cover become very, very difficult. So if you narrow off your two central midfielders like this, you push your fullbacks a little bit further forward, and then you really widen your centre-backs, and even use Lomans potentially as a third centre-back in the back line, then these gaps become too big for Everton to jump over. Barry can try and lock United to one side by standing here, for example, but once that ball goes over, this is a lot of ground that Dewsbury Hall has now got to cover, and he's a very energetic player. He'll give it a good go, but that's a lot of ground that he's got to cover. And I actually think Maguire can use that momentum against him. As Dewsbury Hall comes out, I think Maguire can use that momentum to go past. But also, if United are clever and just occasionally drop the midfielder a little bit deeper, you can sort of escape that pressing shadow, and now you've got time, and Everton have sort of got their press wrong, and you've got out from the back. Now, as we move to the next phase of play, I think that Aston Villa game suddenly becomes very, very relevant. Because in that game, Villa used Buendia on the left wing, and they used Ian Martin as an overlapping left back. So the left winger, Buendia, would come inside the pitch, and Martin from left back would fly forward, which is very, very similar to how Manchester United like to play, often building possession in a back three, with Luke Shaw being released down the left-hand side, and the left winger coming infield a little bit more. And for Everton, this caused real problems. You see, Everton are a side that always like to get pressure on the ball. They don't just sit there and wait to be defeated. In moments like this, they try and force you backwards. They try and jump, they try and have a go. However, for Everton, there is big confusion down the right side of their defence between Patterson when he plays, and in this particular Villa game, it was McNeil, more likely to be Njai this time out, but there is a problem there defensively because of how Everton like to defend. When Manchester United play in this way, it can actually cause some real problems because Patterson prefers to play wider against the overlapping fullback. What some teams will do is as the fullback comes forward, the winger will drop in and follow, and you'll play like that. That's sometimes what we'll see. So the fullback will tuck in and the winger will drop a little bit deeper. But Everton don't like to do that. Instead, what tends to happen is the winger will actually drop off and play more central, more narrow, and the fullback will play a little bit wider, which in theory is great, but our wingers, someone like Njai, actually natural defending in these parts of the pitch. Is that really where they want to go? And what we saw for Aston Villa against Everton was that Buendia could find all sorts of pockets behind the Everton players, behind McNeil in that game. And McNeil in positions like this just doesn't want to be defending there. That's not a zone of the pitch that he wants to be in. So that's definitely something that United can exploit. It's also something that we can turn into quite an attacking weapon. Because if Cunha was to now make a run into this sort of area, Njai is still going to follow him. Again, that is not a part of the pitch where he wants to be defending. He's a winger. He doesn't want to be there. And you'll see here, McNeil in that position actually makes sort of a defensive error on the clearance, and Aston Villa get into a really good position, all because they've got a player here, Everton, defending a zone which doesn't really suit them and isn't really natural to them. So I think this is absolutely something that United can use. It's why I've gone for Cunha and Luke Shaw down the left in my starting 11, because I think Cunha drifting inside would be really useful. And also his ability to drop deeper and make the extra man in midfield, because that is something else that Everton struggle with. This sort of idea and pattern of play is also something that United could use to gain territory and really move the game towards Everton's half of the pitch, which I think as United fans is where we would like the ball to be, because we feel a little bit safer when the ball is over there. And the reason for that is actually quite simple, to be honest. It's quite a simple thing to try and understand. If you've got Luke Shaw going forward, attracting the attention of Patterson, and you've got Cunha coming inside, taking Iliman Njai into these positions in here, well, then there's quite a big gap that opens up, really, isn't there? If we just mark it, there is quite a big gap there that sort of just starts to appear. Now, it's in a part of the pitch where Everton won't be too concerned. It's still very far away from the Everton goal. But for Manchester United, particularly when you've got the ball on the right-hand side with Dalot, with Casemiro, with Harry Maguire, and you sort of cycle that ball round, when you play against this Everton team, there is the ability to step with your left-sided defender, stepping into that patch of grass right in front of them, almost unchallenged. And when you think this is Lisandro Martinez doing that, stepping into these parts of the pitch, that's potentially very dangerous, because Lisandro Martinez is one of the best passers of a football in the Premier League. So having him in a position where he's got time, he can get his head up, that could be a deadly weapon to create a chance, but also simply to get territory for United, to force Everton to slowly sink off deeper and deeper, because United are sort of building momentum and pressure. Now, this inevitably brings us on to the dreaded low block in the final third. The Manchester United nightmare, a team that's got lots of players behind the ball, and you've got to try and find a way through it. The question is, how do you do that against this Everton team? Where are the gaps, and what can Manchester United do? Well, first of all, we have to consider Everton's defensive structure and the way that they like to play. Under David Moyes off the ball in these positions, on paper, it looks like a 4-4-2. The 10, Dewsbury Hall, will play a little bit higher up the pitch, closer to Barry, and it looks like a 4-4-2. However, the behaviours within the system sometimes turn it to more of a diamond, because often one of the central midfielders will jump and try and press just a little bit higher. Now, apologies if this is all getting a little bit crowded, but that's what happens when there's 100 players close to each other in a low block. But sometimes Everton will just jump with one of the central midfielders a little bit higher, particularly if United were to stagger in midfield. Let's say Casemiro was playing deeper, Kobbie was playing higher. You could see someone like Idrissa Gueye trying to jump towards Casemiro to get pressure on him. However, again, I don't mind it as an idea. I like to see teams that defensively are still aggressive in every phase. But again, let's talk about player instinct. Let's talk about player habit and I guess player ability as well. And let's just mark quickly two people on the pitch. Two very good footballers, McNeil and Ndiaye. Very, very good players. But in these moments where one of the midfielders is defending a little bit higher, are they really the guys that you want tucking in and defending your half spaces? I don't think they are. I think this is a position where Manchester United may just be able to find pockets behind these guys, especially with someone like Harry Maguire trying to split the lines to play through them, or more importantly, Lisandro Martinez trying to do the same. Dalot can do it as well. I think there are spaces behind these wingers who are being forced to play in midfield. Look at Grealish here. He just doesn't have the defensive instinct, and that gap does open up in the half space behind him, all because the central midfielder was caught that much higher up the pitch. So I think this is something that United can use to hurt this Everton team. I also think there is a chance for United to hurt this Everton side by moving the ball wide before then coming back inside the pitch. So of course, initially for that to work, we need some width. If we are threatening through the middle of the pitch, Everton will narrow off a little bit, but that does open up more space out wide. I've gone for Mbeumo in this game over Ahmad, simply because of the other profiles that I wanted in the attack. But if Ahmad was to play, I would not have a problem with that. Of course, a great footballer to trying to break down a low block. So either way, it's fine. That's called squad depth. Two very good players. However, as we look to attack this Everton side, I think there is something that opens up. They prioritise defending their box. That is what they want to do. Patterson in there, Tarkowski, Branthwaite, it could be Michael Keane, Mikalenko as well. All of these guys will often drop into the width of their own 18-yard box. They like to play in that part of the pitch. And, I mean, immediately the height that could be in the team is something that we need to think about, thinking about the aerial ability. That is why I would go with Benjamin Sesko up front. If we are to have any chance of winning a header in the air, it's not going to be Mbeumo or Cunha, is it? Beating these two, you wouldn't imagine. Or, again, Michael Keane. So Benjamin Sesko is the player that I would go for. But actually, the more important reason as to why I would go for Sesko is because he occupies the centre-backs more than what some of the other guys do. So as this ball goes wide, to Luke Shaw on the left, and I think it's important that it's Luke Shaw. I think this is key. You're expecting that high ball into the box, but ultimately, you know, Sesko's the big threat, and Everton are aware of that. So Sesko will play on the last line. It's what he does. He plays on the shoulder. He's a proper striker, proper old-school striker in the box. But Everton have two players against him, Branthwaite and Tarkowski, two centre-backs ready to deal with him in the air. That's the important part. In the air, Tarkowski and Branthwaite are brilliant defensively. But what if we can play the ball along the floor? But not even to Benjamin Sesko, but actually a little bit of space that is just opened up behind him. Low crosses against Everton are the way forward, in my opinion. But not low crosses fizzed across that front post. Low crosses cut back towards the penalty spot. I think that is how you can hurt this Everton team. As you move around the outside with someone like Luke Shaw, left-footed, and Sesko makes the run, he occupies the centre-backs. I think this space opens up here to cut the ball in front of the Everton centre-backs, behind the Everton midfielders. And this is where someone like Cunha arriving onto that ball could be lethal, as could Bruno Fernandes, and Mbeumo coming in from the far side. I think there's something that we can really get at here. And the reason why I've highlighted James Garner is because it is sort of his role to make sure he drops in far enough to stop these balls. The problem with Garner is, if you watch him in these moments here against Aston Villa, he's not actually amazing at scanning in his own box when the ball is being delivered in. He has a tendency to hyper-focus on the ball, sometimes losing the space and the marker behind him. So when Garner's here, have we got the right tool for this? Let me see if I can just find it. Let's remove that, and let's go to this tool here. There we go, I found it eventually. He wants to look at the ball. He wants to look at the ball. So Garner is here, the ball is wide, that is where Garner wants to be looking. But what he doesn't do enough is have a look over his shoulder and see the space behind him. Here, he doesn't look over his shoulder once. Here, he doesn't look over his shoulder once. And on both occasions, it results in a fantastic opportunity for Morgan Rogers on the edge of the box. And again, if you can get Cunha, Bruno and Bumo into those positions, well, then I think Manchester United can be extremely dangerous. I almost think we have the perfect players potentially to hurt that Everton defence and really exploit their biggest weakness. You've got to occupy the centre-backs. You've got to offer the wide threat. But then that cutback into the box could be dangerous. Now, of course, as always, we've got to remember it's not quite as simple as that. I've just sat there moving around 22 circles, not actually humans. But that's why I tried to focus on Garner towards the end there. Talking less tactically, but actually more about an individual and something that I think is potentially wrong with their game. I think James Garner's a great player, but I just think there is a slight weakness in the box there that you might be able to exploit. And United have the players that can deliver from wide. Shaw can play that low ball across, absolutely. And Bumo can deliver well from the right-hand side. And we have the perfect player in Šeško to occupy the centre-backs and the perfect players to attack the edge of the box. I think it could be dangerous for United, and I think this can be a great opportunity for United to get a huge 3 points, and I think it would be a bit of a statement. As fans, we all have that concern. How are we going to do in the games where we've got more of the ball and we've got to break a team down? Well, this is the perfect test. It will not be easy. It's a very, very difficult game. United have to be better than what they were against West Ham. We have to threaten in more different ways. That is the big challenge. But get it right and United should have too much quality. So yes, that is how I think Manchester United can beat Everton and extend their position in the top 4. But now I want to hear from you guys in the comments down below. How are you feeling about the game? What are your score predictions? And how do you think the game is going to go? Let me know what you think. But apart from that, we are now finished for today. So thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you have enjoyed it. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.